She freed a wolf bound in iron chains. When he shifted, the Alpha King claimed her as his own. Alara moved carefully along the narrow, winding path, her satchel heavy with herbs she had gathered from the edges of the kingdom. The air was thick with mist, carrying the scent of wet earth and a faint, strange metallic tang. She had always been drawn to the forest, despite the warnings etched into the tales of her village. Mothers whispered that no one who entered the woods returned the same. Travelers spoke of shadows that moved with intent, of eyes that watched from deep among the trees. But Alara was not like the others. Her curiosity, paired with an unshakable sense of compassion, drove her deeper than anyone else dared. She paused near a clearing, kneeling to examine a patch of crimson blossoms that thrived despite the cold, damp soil. Her fingers brushed the petals, careful not to crush them when a sound froze her in place. A low, guttural growl echoed from the underbrush, vibrating through her bones. Ilara turned, her heart beating faster. The forest was quiet again, save for the whispering wind. Then she saw him. A massive wolf, larger than any she had ever imagined, lay in the center of the clearing. Its fur was silver and black, matted with dried blood and dirt. But what caught her breath was the iron chains that bound its limbs and chest, clinking faintly as the beast struggled. The wolf's eyes glowed, not with animal instinct, but with something more intelligent, something aware. Ilara, a voice whispered in her mind, or perhaps it was just a trick of the wind. She shook her head and knelt closer. The wolf growled again, more weakly this time, and she saw the raw marks where the iron had cut into his flesh. Compassion overrode fear. She reached forward, running her fingers along the cold metal. "You don't deserve this," she murmured. As her hands pressed against the chains, a warmth spread from her palms, seeping into the links. The wolf's eyes widened, reflecting a storm of emotion: anger, fear, pain, and something almost pleading. Then, with a sound that was part roar and part sigh, the chains shattered, scattering across the forest floor. The wolf stepped forward, shaking free from the final restraints. It was magnificent and terrifying, muscles rippling under fur that shimmered in the fading light. It regarded her, its gaze intense, almost human. Then, impossibly, it began to shift. Ilara stumbled backward, clutching her satchel as the wolf's form stretched and contracted. Bones snapped and reshaped, fur receding as a tall, powerful man emerged where the beast had been. His eyes, amber and glowing faintly in the twilight, locked onto hers. Scarred from battles she could only imagine, with hair as dark as the forest shadows, he carried the presence of a king and the raw, unrestrained power of a predator. "You freed me," he said, his voice low and resonant, a mixture of gratitude and warning. "And now you belong to me." Ilara swallowed hard, though her throat felt dry. Her mind raced, trying to understand how she could feel awe and fear all at once. I didn't know," she began. "You didn't know what?" he interrupted, taking a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "That the chains were binding more than flesh, that breaking them would change everything. I couldn't leave you like that," she said, her voice trembling. "It's cruel, it's wrong," he tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her shiver. "Cruel, wrong. Or brave," Alara's breath caught. She had never felt such scrutiny, as if he could see every corner of her heart. And yet, despite the fear, there was a pull, magnetic and inescapable. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The man, Kale, as his name revealed itself in her mind, moved closer, not threatening, but impossible to ignore. His wolf instincts lingered beneath his human form, a constant, primal tension that made her pulse quicken. "You do not yet understand the danger you've brought upon yourself," Kale said. "Enemies will come. The curse that bound me was not made by idle hands. Those who bound me feared what I could become." Ilara's fingers tightened around the strap of her satchel. "I don't care about danger, You care for life," Kale interrupted softly. "Not for power, not for kingdoms, not for what men seek. That is why you survived the forest when others did not." A silence fell between them, broken only by the whispering wind and the distant cry of an owl. Then, suddenly, Kale's expression shifted. His jaw tightened and his eyes darkened with a shadow of rage and sorrow. "They will come for me," he said, almost to himself. "And now they will come for you." Alara's heart tightened in her chest. "I'm not afraid," she said, though a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. "I've faced worse than shadows." Kale laughed softly, a sound that was both musical and chilling. "Worse than shadows. You do not yet know what shadows can do." He extended a hand, strong and certain. "Come, if you wish to survive, and if you wish to understand the world you've stepped into, you must come with me." Alara hesitated. She wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but something in his gaze stopped her. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength, the barely restrained power coiled beneath his skin. Together, they moved deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to part for him, or perhaps the world itself acknowledged the presence of the freed king. The ground was littered with remnants of his imprisonment, charred wood, twisted iron, and the faint marks of ancient magic. As they walked, Kale spoke of his past, his voice low and mournful. He had once been the king of a kingdom that spanned mountains and valleys, revered and feared in equal measure. But a curse, cast by those who envied his power, had reduced him to the beast bound in iron chains. Centuries had passed in that form, time measured not by days but by hunger, loneliness, and the endless ache of imprisonment. "And you freed me," he said, shaking his head. "No one has dared, not for centuries. Why did you?" Alara's steps faltered. "Because it was wrong," she said simply. "Because I couldn't leave you to suffer." He looked at her then, really looked, and she felt exposed under the weight of his gaze. "And now," he said, "you carry the same danger I do. My enemy's my curse, the power I cannot yet control, it is yours as well." Alara swallowed, realizing the truth of his words. She had stepped into a world of shadows, of kings and curses, of power that could destroy or redeem. Yet despite the fear, a spark of determination ignited within her. She would face it, not for Kale alone, but for herself, for the chance to see the truth of this strange, dark world. The night deepened as they reached a small clearing, where moonlight spilled like silver upon the forest floor. Kale paused, turning to her with an expression both tender and fierce. "Tonight," he said, "the forest will test us. The curse stirs, and those who sought to keep me chained will not rest. You must be ready." Alara nodded, feeling the weight of destiny settle upon her shoulders. She had freed a wolf bound in iron chains, and in doing so had bound herself to a king. The path ahead was dangerous, unknown, and fraught with shadows, but it was hers to walk. Kale's eyes softened for a brief moment, and she saw the man beneath the beast, the king beneath the wolf. "Stay close," he said, "and do not falter. Whatever comes, we face it together." A distant howl broke the silence, echoing across the mist-shrouded forest. It was both a warning and a promise, a herald of danger, of adventure, of the bond they had begun. Alara took a deep breath, feeling the forest around her, the presence of the Wolf King beside her, and the stirrings of something she could not yet name in her heart. Whatever awaited them, she would not turn back. And in that moment, under the pale light of the blood moon rising above the trees, the forest seemed to hum with magic. The chains were broken, yes, but the story had only just begun. The wind carried a whisper that chilled her to the bone. "They are coming." Alara gripped Kale's hand tighter. She would not run. She would not falter. She had freed the wolf, and now she would face whatever the forest or the curse demanded of her. And far above, unseen, a shadow stirred. The forest of Virlia was quieter now, but the silence was not comforting. Every step Alara took beside Kale, the freed Wolf King, felt heavier than the last. The mist clung to their clothes and hair, curling around them like ghostly fingers. The distant howl she had heard the previous night seemed closer now, echoing through the twisted trees. "Why do they hunt you?" Alara asked softly, her voice breaking the tense quiet. Kale's eyes, golden and unreadable, scanned the forest around them. "Because I was powerful once," he said slowly. "Because they feared me. And because some grudges do not die with time, they wait." Alara swallowed. "And now?" "Now, because you freed me, they see a new threat," he said. "You are bound to me, willingly or not. That alone makes you a target." The weight of his words pressed down on her, but she refused to show fear. "Then we face it together," she said. Her hand brushed against his, and for a brief moment she felt the warmth beneath his skin, a fire that was not his wolf but the man he once was. Kale did not reply. His jaw tightened and he kept walking, but his grip on her hand never wavered. The ruined castle appeared as they broke through the forest, shrouded in shadow and fog. Its towers clawed at the sky, sharp against the fading light. The walls were blackened by age and war, and a faint, blue light shimmered from the cracks in the stones. "This is my home now," Kale said quietly, his voice almost a growl. "Not because I claim it, but because the curse tied me to it. It waits here in these halls in the echoes of the past." Alara followed, her heart pounding as she stepped over broken stone and fallen banners. The castle smelled of dampness, smoke, and something older, ancient magic that whispered in corners and stirred the shadows. Inside, the halls were empty, yet every step seemed to echo 1,000 voices. Portraits of long-dead kings and queens lined the walls, their eyes dark and judging. The floors were cracked, and the chandeliers hung like skeletons of a forgotten time. Kale led her to a large hall, where the moonlight poured through shattered windows. Dust swirled in the beams, creating the illusion of dancing spirits. He stopped at the center, looking at her with a strange intensity. "You must understand," he said, "this place is not a home, it is a prison. And the curse, it is not gone, it waits. It tests me, tests us." Alara nodded, trying to steady herself. "I am not afraid," she said, though her voice was quieter than she intended. "I have faced shadows before." Kale's gaze softened slightly and he stepped closer. "You do not know shadows," he said. "Not like this." Days passed in a blur of whispered warnings and cautious exploration. Kale taught Alara how to sense the presence of magic in the halls, to feel the tension of spirits lingering in corners, and to recognize when danger approached. The castle was alive with the memories of the past, memories that were often painful and sometimes violent. Alara learned quickly. She could feel the pulse of magic under the stones, the cold touch of a long-dead king's anger, and the soft whispers of those who had died waiting for freedom. It was exhausting, yet fascinating. Kale watched her closely, his golden eyes often filled with a mixture of awe and worry. "You adapt quickly," he said one night as they walked along a balcony overlooking the stormy sea. "Few can do what you do and survive." Alara glanced at him. "I will survive," she said firmly. "I will face whatever comes as long as you are with me." Kale's jaw tightened. "It is not about survival," he said quietly. "It is about power, control, and choice. You cannot understand yet the weight of what you've stepped into." The first real test came during the night of the crimson moon. The castle trembled as a cold wind howled through broken windows. Shadows stretched across the halls like living fingers, and the air smelled of iron and smoke. Alara was awake, her senses alert as Kale moved through the hallways. "Something comes," he said, his voice a low growl. "Stay behind me." She nodded, though fear whispered in her heart. She could feel it too, the presence of those who sought the king, those who wished to see the curse continue. A masked figure appeared suddenly, moving with silent grace. Its weapon glinted in the pale light, aimed straight at Kale. Without thinking, Alara stepped forward, raising her hands instinctively. A soft, golden light emerged from her palms, forming a shield that deflected the blow. Kale's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and admiration in his gaze. You have power," he said, his voice both shocked and proud. Alara lowered her hands, trembling slightly. "I don't know how," she admitted. "It just happened." The masked figure attacked again, and Kale moved with lethal precision, blocking and striking with the strength of both man and wolf. Alara's magic flickered, guided by instinct more than skill, but it was enough to help him. Together they fought, moving as if they had trained for this their whole lives. Finally, the intruder was driven back, disappearing into the shadows with a hiss. Kale's breathing was heavy, his eyes glowing in the dim light. He turned to her, concern written across his face. "You must learn to control it," he said. "The curse, my enemies, they will not stop. You cannot remain unprepared." Alara nodded, understanding now the weight of her decision to free him. She was no longer just a healer or scholar. She was bound to a king, bound to a curse, and bound to a destiny that was far greater than she had imagined. In the days that followed, Kale and Alara explored the castle together, uncovering rooms filled with relics of the past, tattered banners, rusted weapons, and books filled with knowledge long forgotten. Each discovery brought them closer, their conversations shifting from caution to curiosity, and finally to something warmer. One evening they sat by a shattered window, watching the storm lash the cliffs below. The wind tore through the halls, carrying whispers and echoes, yet for a moment there was calm. "Alara," Kale said softly, "why do you stay? You could leave. The forest is free, the world is yours." She looked at him, her heart steady. "Because I cannot," she said. "Because I cannot leave you to face this alone." Kale's hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that carried more emotion than words could convey. "And if I fail?" he asked. "Then we face it together," she replied, her voice unwavering. A silence fell between them, filled with the sound of the storm and the distant echoes of the castle's past. In that silence, they both understood the truth. They were bound, not by chains, but by choice. But the castle would not remain quiet for long. One night, as they rested in a hidden chamber filled with books and relics, a soft knock echoed from the door. Alara's heart skipped a beat. Kale's eyes narrowed. "Do not answer," he warned. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. Shadows shifted unnaturally, as if aware of their presence. Kale stood, his wolf instincts surfacing, and moved toward the door. When he opened it, a figure stood there, cloaked in darkness. A single phrase escaped their lips: "The king has returned, and so has the curse." Alara felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever this figure was, they were not here by chance. They had come for Kale, and now, inevitably, for her as well. Kale's eyes flared with golden light, the wolf beneath the man stirring, ready to defend what he had claimed. "Leave," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The figure laughed softly, a sound that echoed like broken glass. "We will see," they said, disappearing into the shadows before Alara or Kale could react. The castle trembled again, as if warning them of the dangers to come. Kale turned to Alara, his expression unreadable. "This is only the beginning," he said. Alara took a deep breath, gripping his hand. "Then we begin together," she said firmly. And in the darkness of the castle, surrounded by shadows and echoes of the past, they both understood. Survival would not come from strength alone, but from trust, courage, and the bond they were beginning to forge. The crimson moon hung above the castle, a silent witness to the awakening of forces neither of them fully understood. And in the distant forest, a shadow moved, watching, waiting, and preparing for the next step in a game that had only just begun. The castle of Virlia had grown quieter in the days after the cloaked figure's visit, but the silence was heavy and full of tension. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, and the wind seemed to whisper warnings through broken windows. Alara could feel the pulse of unseen magic beneath the stone floors, like a heartbeat that matched her own. Kale moved through the halls with the ease of a predator, but there was a war in his eyes. The wolf beneath the king's human form stirred constantly, restless and vigilant. Alara followed him closely, her own senses sharpening with every day spent in the castle. She had begun to feel the threads of magic around her, subtle and dangerous, as if the castle itself was alive, testing them both. "Ilara," Kale said one evening, his voice low and serious as they sat atop the highest tower overlooking the stormy cliffs. The crimson light of the setting sun painted his face in gold and shadow. "You feel it, don't you? The curse. It's waking, stirring inside me, and I cannot control it entirely yet." Ilara nodded. "I can feel it too. Sometimes when I touch the walls, the floors, it's like the castle is breathing and I feel something moving." Kale's eyes softened slightly, though the tension remained. "The curse is old, older than you or I can imagine. It was not meant to be broken lightly. It binds me to this land, to the wolf, and to the choices I have made. And now you are bound to it too." Alara's hand brushed against his, instinctively, and he did not pull away. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, the fire in his amber eyes softening with unspoken emotion. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice steady despite the fear knotting her stomach. Kale studied her, a mixture of awe and worry in his gaze. "You are brave, Ilara, braver than anyone I have known in centuries." The nights grew longer, and the forest outside the castle seemed to press closer, as though the trees themselves were watching. The whispers of spirits, echoes of past kings and queens, and the shifting shadows all made the air feel thick with magic and danger. Ilara found herself unable to sleep, wandering the halls with Kale beside her. One night, they discovered a hidden chamber behind a crumbling wall, filled with ancient scrolls and relics. Dust covered the floor, and cobwebs hung like delicate lace. A faint glow shimmered from the center of the room, where a stone pedestal held a crystal orb, faintly pulsing with golden light. Kale approached it cautiously, his hand hovering above the orb. "This contains knowledge power. It was left by the sorcerers who created the curse. It may help us or it may destroy us." Ilara stepped closer, curiosity overcoming caution. "Let me see," she said. As she reached out, the orb flared and her palm tingled with warmth. Visions flashed before her eyes, memories of Kale's past, the kingdom he had ruled, the betrayal that had led to his imprisonment. She saw the wolf he had become, chained and angry, and the centuries he had spent in isolation. Kale watched her carefully. "The orb shows truth, but it does not forgive. You must be ready for what you see." Ilara's eyes widened, but she did not look away. "I understand," she said softly. "I want to know." The orb dimmed, leaving her with a deep understanding of the weight Kale carried. The anger, the sorrow, the longing for freedom and connection. And intertwined with it all, the curse that threatened to consume him if he ever let his guard down. Days turned into nights filled with preparation. Kale taught Ilara to focus her emerging magic, to sense danger before it arrived, and to trust her instincts. They sparred in the halls, sometimes verbally, sometimes with the magic that flickered at their fingertips. Each moment brought them closer, the tension between them growing stronger. One evening, as they practiced in the main hall, Kale paused mid-step, his eyes narrowing. "You are stronger than I anticipated," he said quietly. "But strength alone will not save you. You must learn to bend the shadows, to anticipate their movements, to trust your heart." Ilara nodded, understanding more than words could say. "And you," she asked softly, "will you trust your heart, Kale?" He looked at her, and for a moment the wolf inside him seemed to flicker, a dangerous light in his amber eyes. "I do not know," he admitted. "I have spent centuries fearing what I could become if I let myself feel, if I let myself care." Her hand found his again. "Then feel with me," she whispered. "Not alone, together." Kale's jaw tightened, but his hand stayed in hers. For a long moment they simply sat together, the storm outside fading into distant rumbling, and shared a quiet understanding. But the castle's calm did not last. One night a message arrived, carried by a raven with black-tipped wings. The scroll it clutched was sealed with crimson wax, bearing a symbol of a serpent coiled around a crown. Kale's eyes darkened as he read it. "They know I am free," he said, voice low and dangerous. "They know you are here." Ilara's heart pounded. "Who are they?" The ones who bound me, Kale said. The ones who whispered the curse into life, and now they want to finish what they started. He turned to her, expression unreadable. You must stay close. They will not hesitate to use you against me. Alara's resolve hardened. Then we face them, she said, together. The following days were tense. Shadows moved in the corners of the halls, and the whispers of spirits grew louder. Alara trained relentlessly, honing her magic and learning to sense danger. She and Kale grew closer, their trust building through shared moments of vulnerability. They spoke of fears, regrets, and the loneliness of lives shaped by power and curse. Kale revealed more of his past, the kingdom he had ruled, the betrayal of his closest allies, and the isolation of his wolf form. Alara shared her own fears and dreams, and slowly, the bond between them deepened. It was no longer just trust or respect. It was something tender, something unspoken, growing stronger with every shared glance, every hand brushed against one another. One evening, Kale led her to the cliffs beyond the castle. The storm had passed, leaving the sea glittering beneath the silver light of the moon. Look, he said softly, his voice almost gentle. Even in darkness there is beauty. Even in curses there is hope. Alara looked out at the horizon, feeling the wind in her hair, and nodded. We will find a way, she said. Kale turned to her, and for a moment the wolf in him flickered to the surface, his golden eyes fierce and protective. And if we fail, he asked. We won't, she replied firmly, because we face it together. The true test came sooner than they expected. A moonless night brought with it a chilling wind, and the castle's shadows shifted unnaturally. Alara woke to find Kale standing at the doorway, his form tense, senses alert. They are here, he said, voice low, almost a growl. They have come for us. Alara rose, gripping her hands tightly as magic flickered at her fingertips. Kale's wolf instincts surged, his presence a shield around her as they moved through the halls. Shadows moved, coalescing into figures cloaked in darkness, their eyes glowing faintly with malevolence. The figures attacked, swift and silent. Kale met them with controlled fury, the wolf beneath his human form emerging in bursts of strength and speed. Alara's magic flared, golden light deflecting attacks and creating shields that protected them both. They fought as one, movement instinctive, connected, a rhythm forming between them that was almost unspoken. And yet, despite their power, the enemies were relentless. At the height of the battle, one shadow lunged toward Alara, faster than her senses could predict. Kale reacted instantly, his form shifting slightly as he intercepted the figure, but the blow sent him staggering backward. Alara felt a surge of fear and anger, and instinctively her magic erupted in a brilliant pulse of light that drove the shadows back. Kale's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and pride. You have power beyond what I sensed, he said, voice shaking with both relief and awe. Alara's chest heaved. I didn't know I could do that, she admitted. Kale approached her, his golden eyes softening yet still fierce. You are stronger than you realize, he said, and together we are unstoppable. They stood side by side, the storm outside quiet now, the castle trembling but holding. The enemies had been driven back, but Kale knew this was only the beginning. In the quiet that followed, Kale turned to Alara. You have changed everything, he said. Not just the curse, but me. I do not know how to live without the wolf, but I also do not know how to live without you. Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. Then we live together, she said softly, and we face whatever comes. Kale's hand found hers, their fingers entwining, a bond of trust and courage forming stronger than any chains that had ever bound him. But as they looked out at the horizon, the wind whispered again through the castle. A shadow lingered in the distance, unseen but felt, a promise that their journey was far from over. Kale's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. This is not over, he said. Alara nodded, determination in her gaze. No, but whatever comes, we face it together. And under the moonless sky, the two of them stood, hearts bound by trust, courage, and the beginnings of something deeper, ready for the trials the night would bring. The castle of Virlia trembled beneath the weight of the storm outside, though it was no ordinary wind or rain. That shook the ancient stones. Magic pulsed through the walls as if the castle itself were alive, sensing the culmination of the curse that had bound Kale for centuries. Alara stood beside him in the main hall, her fingers entwined with his, feeling the pulse of his energy, of the wolf beneath the man. The night was moonless, the shadows long and hungry. Outside, the forest seemed to lean in, waiting, watching. "They are coming," Kale said, his voice a low growl. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the dim candlelight, the wolf stirring beneath his human form. "This is the moment they have waited for, and so have we." Alara's heart pounded in her chest. "Then we are ready," she said. Her hands glowed softly, magic coursing through her veins, mingling with the latent power Kale had taught her to harness. Together, they felt something larger than themselves, a bond of trust and courage that could face whatever the darkness would throw at them. The first attack came like a shadow on the wind. Figures cloaked in darkness poured through the shattered windows, moving silently but with deadly purpose. Their eyes glimmered faintly red, a reflection of the malice that had bound Kale for centuries. Kale shifted partially, the wolf in him surging forward. His claws and strength were unmatched, but Alara's magic was now more than a flicker. It was a beacon, a shield, and a weapon all at once. Together they fought. Alara's light flared, forming barriers and pulses that pushed the attackers back, while Kale moved like a whirlwind, his strikes precise and fierce. Every blow he struck was tempered with control, careful not to let the wolf's fury overwhelm reason. And yet, despite their skill, the enemies were relentless. For every one they defeated, two more emerged from the shadows, bound by ancient curses and driven by centuries-old vengeance. As the battle raged, Kale noticed something, a pulse of dark energy gathering in the center of the hall. A glowing sigil etched into the floor, faint but alive, began to radiate power. This was the heart of the curse, the place where the magic that had bound him was strongest. "Alara," he shouted over the clash of magic and claws, "we must break the sigil. It is the source of the curse's power." Alara nodded, summoning every ounce of her energy. She focused on the glowing runes, feeling them vibrate beneath her touch. She reached out with her magic, channeling warmth, hope, and courage into the sigil. Her hands glowed brighter with each passing second, and the runes shivered under the force of her will. Kale stood beside her, his claws striking down the shadowy figures that tried to reach her. The wolf within him surged, instinct and power perfectly balanced with the man's determination. Every time an enemy came too close, he met it with force and precision, protecting her as if she were the most precious thing in existence. For a moment, it seemed impossible. The sigil resisted, thrumming with centuries of dark energy, feeding on fear and anger. Alara's arms ached, her energy waning. She looked at Kale, his golden eyes fixed on her, full of trust and encouragement. "You can do this," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I trust you, we will end this together." Her heart swelled. She was not alone. Together they were more than magic, more than strength. They were a force that could challenge the curse itself. Alara focused again, her magic flaring brighter than ever. Light poured from her hands, enveloping the sigil in a brilliant glow. The runes screamed in silent agony, shattering one by one, their dark energy unraveling. Kale's voice joined hers, a low, resonant call that seemed to bind their energies together, amplifying the power of their connection. The sigil shattered in a burst of light, and for a moment the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Shadows screamed and fled, dissolving into nothingness as the curse's hold weakened. When the light faded, the hall was quiet. The storm outside had ceased, leaving only the soft whisper of wind through broken windows. Kale's wolf form receded, leaving him standing tall as a man, though his golden eyes retained a hint of the predator within. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but victorious. Kale knelt beside her, his hand brushing her hair back from her face. "You did it," he said softly, awe and admiration in his voice. "You freed me, freed us." She looked up at him, her own hands trembling. "We did it," she said. "Together." Kale smiled, a rare, genuine expression that softened his usually stern features. He pulled her close, and she rested against him, feeling the warmth of both man and wolf, the strength that had carried them through centuries of darkness. In the days that followed, the castle seemed to breathe a new life. The shadows that had haunted the halls for centuries were gone, leaving light to spill through broken windows. The air felt warmer, the stones less heavy. Magic remained, but it was no longer oppressive. It was alive, vibrant, and safe. Kale walked the halls with Alara, showing her the parts of the castle he had never dared to enter while cursed. Together, they explored chambers filled with relics of the past, finding stories of kings and queens who had once ruled the land. It was a quiet kind of redemption, a healing for both the castle and themselves. One evening they reached the highest tower again, overlooking the sea and forest. The sky was clear, the moon full and bright. Kale held her hand, feeling her heartbeat against his, and for a moment the world seemed to fall away. "Alara," he said softly, "you changed everything. Not just the curse, not just me, but my heart. I have spent centuries alone, fearing what I might become, but with you, I feel whole." Alara looked at him, feeling the truth of his words resonate within her. "And you changed me," she said. "You showed me courage, trust, and the strength I didn't know I had." Kale's hand brushed her cheek, his eyes intense. "Then we are bound," he said, "not by chains or curses, but by choice, by trust, by love." Her heart swelled. "Yes," she whispered, "together." The bond they had forged in the fires of battle and the shadows of the curse was now unbreakable. They had faced magic, enemies, and centuries of fear, emerging not only victorious but transformed. Kale was no longer just a king or a wolf, and Alara was no longer just a healer. Together, they were something stronger, something complete. Yet, even in the quiet moments, the castle whispered. Magic lingered in the walls, reminding them that the world beyond these stones was vast and unpredictable. The forest remained, full of mysteries yet to be discovered, and the kingdom awaited a new ruler, one who could balance power and compassion, strength and trust. Kale turned to Alara, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. "This is only the beginning," he said. "There will always be shadows, challenges, but whatever comes, we face it together." Alara smiled, feeling the truth of his words. "Together," she echoed. Days turned into weeks, and the castle slowly regained life. Villagers returned. Whispers of the Wolf Kings returned, spreading like wildfire. Kale, once feared and cursed, now ruled not through terror but through respect and wisdom. Alara stood by his side, her magic now refined and controlled, a guiding light in the castle and kingdom alike. They trained together, explored the forests, and faced smaller threats with confidence. Every challenge only strengthened their bond, every danger a reminder of the trials they had overcome. And every night, beneath the moonlight, they would stand together on the cliffs, feeling the wind and the pulse of the world around them, their hearts aligned and their spirits unbroken. The final test of the curse had ended, but the magic that had once bound Kale remained in a different form, not a threat, but a gift. It allowed them to sense danger, to protect the kingdom, and to understand the hidden forces that shaped their world. Alara's power, awakened in the crucible of their battle, became a force of hope rather than fear, guiding them both toward a future they could shape together. And as they stood atop the cliffs, the sea stretching endlessly before them, Kale spoke once more, his voice a promise. "No matter what comes," he said, "no matter the shadows, no matter the storms, you and I, Alara, are bound, by choice, by trust, by love." Alara smiled, leaning into him. "And that is stronger than any curse," she said softly. Above them, the stars shone brighter than ever. The forest whispered in quiet approval. and the castle of Virlia stood as a monument to redemption, courage, and the power of hearts bound together. The Wolf King and the healer, freed from the chains of the past, now faced the future as one, ready for whatever magic, mystery, or challenge the world would bring. And somewhere in the distance, unseen but felt, a faint shadow stirred. But this time, Kale and Alara were ready. Together, nothing could break them.